Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Texas PTA Connect Conversations, a panel discussion about mindful media, thriving as a family in the digital age. My name is Melinda Samberson, and I am the VP of Programs and Resources for Texas PTA. I'm honored to be here to help facilitate this important conversation. Today, we're talking about mindful media and what it means to raise and support children and teens in a constantly changing digital world. Whether it's social media, screen time, or how we model digital habits ourselves, this topic affects every family. Our goal isn't to judge or overwhelm, but to offer perspective, share resources, and create space for open, honest dialogue about the challenges and opportunities that come with raising kids in a connected world. Before we get started, I want to introduce Jennifer Easley, our Texas PTA president. Jennifer?
Welcome, everyone, and thank you, Melinda, along with the entire Texas PTA Programs and Resources Committee for bringing together such a thoughtful panel on a topic that truly hits home. Advocacy starts right where we are at home and in our local communities, and at the heart of effective advocacy lies education and awareness, and today's conversation reflects that truth. I wish we didn't have to have it, but the reality is that the digital world, while full of opportunities, also presents real and growing challenges for our kids and families. As parents, many of us feel like our children are constantly on digital devices, including laptops and iPads issued at school. And while social media platforms have made progress in building guardrails, we know it's still not enough. So things are evolving, technology, parenting, legislation, and we have to evolve right alongside them. And as we finish up Texas's 89th regular legislative session, where Texas PTA advocated for addressing cell phone use at school and expanding mental health support, I'm reminded that we as parents must pay attention. And that message couldn't be more relevant. And just showing up for this conversation is a meaningful first step. Together, we can build awareness, share strategies, and advocate for better tools and policies to keep our kids to developing healthier digital habits and stronger relationships.
Jennifer, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today. Our goal today is to empower parents and students with the tools they need to recognize red flags in the digital world, understand the unique challenges kids face online, and take proactive steps to build healthy, mindful media habits. We'll start by exploring what it means to grow up in a digital age and how media and technology are shaping identity, relationships, and mental health. Then we'll look at how to spot concerning patterns and online behaviors, whether it's social media pressure, digital addiction, or exposure to harmful content. We'll also talk about how to equip our young people with the confidence and skills to make smart, safe choices online. And finally, we'll share practical strategies and resources to support families in creating balanced, connected, and resilient digital lives. Let's dive in. Joining us today are three subject matter experts who will share their insights and answer your questions. Dr. Kristin Wolfe is a board-certified clinical psychologist and the clinical practice manager for the Suicide Prevention and Resilience at Children's Hospital. It is called SPARC, and that's clinical, that is Suicide Prevention and Resilience at Children's, and it's a program of children's health. Dr. Wolfe specializes in working with adolescent mood disorders and suicide prevention. Additionally, Dr. Wolfe is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at UT Southwestern, where she provides course instruction as well as research and clinical supervision. Dr. Cook currently serves as the managing director of guidance and counseling in Frisco ISD. With her experience as a licensed professional counselor, school professional, and adjunct professor at SMU and Dallas Baptist University, Dr. Cook brings expertise in adolescent development, school safety, and school counseling. Our third panelist is Jennifer Easley, president of Texas PTA, a mother of three. Jennifer has navigated the challenges of raising children through the digital age. She served on the board of David's Legacy Foundation and has been a strong advocate for digital media legislation at both the state and national levels, focusing on cyberbullying and online safety. She brings deep expertise in the legislative process, having worked closely with policymakers and provided testimony to craft and support laws that protect children in online spaces. Her leadership continues to help families facing the realities of parenting in a connected world. Panelists, thank you so much for being with us today. And for the audience, we hope that you will actively participate in the discussion by submitting your questions through the webinar Q&A. Well, there's a lot to unpack, so let's turn to our distinguished guests and our panel of experts to explore how we as parents and community members can address this growing issue and help raise healthy, resilient kids in today's digital world. We know that social media is a huge part of young people's lives today. While it offers connection and creativity, it also brings challenges. Kristin, based on your work with kids, what are the most common mental health concerns you're seeing in children and teens related to social media use?
That is such a great question. And I think it's a question that me and my team hear from caregivers every day. They want to know how social media is impacting their teens' mental health. And I think it's a really nuanced conversation. And if, we could probably spend the entire hour just on this question. But I think we need to consider, when we have adolescents who are already at risk for mental health concerns, that social media may exacerbate those by exposing them to potentially harmful content or maybe taking up time. So I think that's one thing to consider is our teens who are already at risk for mental health concerns. I think the other piece to consider is how our teens are using social media. So a lot of how social media impacts them is going to be based on what they're looking at. It's going to be based on how they interact with it. And it's going to be based on how much time they're spending. So when we look at sort of general clinical trends, what we find is that social media, in a way, exacerbates issues that may already be there. So in the real world, a teen may find out that there was a party they weren't invited to, and that prompts feelings of maybe anxiety or sadness. But in social media, you're now seeing the pictures of that party. You're knowing exactly who went. And so there is that like fear of missing out piece that we see for a lot of our teens, or FOMO. So certainly we see some anxiety and some sadness. I think another thing that social media, or another way that social media impacts our teens, is by taking up time that they might spend doing other things. So I'm going to use sleep as the prime example, right? If our teens are up using social media till 3, 4 a.m., then they're not sleeping. And we know, if you're a parent or a caregiver or a teacher or work with kids in any capacity, if they're not sleeping well, they're not feeling well. And so it's not that social media in and of itself is making them feel poorly, but it's taking up time where they're not engaging in sleep or they're not engaging in pro-social behaviors and things like that. And so I think that's where we start to get a little concerned about the impact that social media is having on their mental health.
Wow, that really helps frame the emotional landscape our kids are navigating and why it's important for us as parents and community members to stay engaged and informed. Let's build on that with Stephanie. Stephanie, in your role supporting students in a very large district and preparing future counselors in the classroom, what are some of the most pressing challenges you see schools facing when it comes to supporting students' mental health in the age of social media? And just as a follow-up after that, how can families and schools work together more effectively to address these concerns?
Yeah, I really appreciated so much of what Dr. Wolfe said, and I really just relate to that comment about the really direct and indirect things that they are and aren't getting to experience, right? And I got to hear a great speaker one time, and they said, technology is anything you didn't grow up with. And I thought immediately of my grandmother who would have to kick the tires to get in the car and check the tire pressure before she would drive a car because she didn't grow up with one. And so for her, it was always familiarizing with herself, like trying to understand, make sure everything was in place. And I think it's such an interesting thing that we do as parents now, because we didn't grow up with it the same way, and yet they do. And so us constantly kind of metaphorically going around to check the tires, what's healthy, what's not. I think that's become such a normal conversation for us, and I'm so grateful for that. And so one of the things that Dr. Wolfe had mentioned is sometimes it's the things they're not getting to experience. They've not known what it's like to sit at a lunch table and not have phones nearby, right? So they're not getting some of that. They've not experienced that time when they had a crush on someone and they had to like lean into having that hard conversation and like actually talk to somebody, right? But so there's some indirect things they're not getting. They're not getting sleep. All of those things impact the way that they would walk into a classroom, right? Their ability to hear someone's perspective and maybe have a different one. But right now they are also trained to have immediate reaction and opinion. And so indirectly, they've missed out on an opportunity to really develop that. And so I know that's an opportunity we're always looking at in schools is how do we increase, you'll hear a lot of schools talk about collaboration like it's a cutting edge futuristic idea. But really it's a lot of us like backfilling some development is learning how to really engage with one another outside of a device. So I would say those direct and indirect piece, direct is teaching them how to use the technology, right? And I think you did such a great job setting that up in the beginning. We are in this age. And so I think it's about doing what we know and helping them engage in that other non-digital world, and then teaching them to be stewards in the digital world and developing a lot of hygiene around that. And one of the things that I really see, and really to answer your follow-up question, is what we can do to address these concerns. I think conversations like this, but embracing the idea around the direct teach piece of the thing that's natural to them, coming alongside them and teaching them the hygiene around it, right? Whether that's where the phone is when they go to bed, where it is when they're sitting at a table, but just making that a very natural part of the conversation, because since part of their world is online, then part of our world is online. And so to make it natural for us to talk about those things. So, my son recently got social media, and I approve his time. So he'll get about 15 to 30 minutes a day, but like we send reels back and forth because I want to talk about those reels at the table in the car, right? So I want to try to create this balance where they learn it's not the only place life is, but it is a place life is. And I'm trying to really build that idea of the flexibility back and forth to build balance, because sometimes there is exposure to things online. And if they're already used to talking to you about that, then that makes it very normal to talk about some of those hard things as well.
Yeah, great. Your perspective highlights the critical role schools play in supporting students' mental health, and also how important it is for families and educators to work hand in hand. Kristin, building on that, how can families recognize when social media is becoming harmful rather than helpful for their children? And how do we assess the impact that social media has on our youth?
Yeah, I think this really builds off of what Dr. Cook was saying about just sort of how our kids experience social media. And I think, part of the way that parents can work with their kids to notice what's going on and how social media is impacting them is just to have the conversation. If we can normalize sitting down at the table and looking at reels or, talking about how social media impacted them that day, like I think that's a really solid place to start, to just normalize the conversation. There's been some really good work come out of the Hamilton Lab out of Rutgers University about different ways to talk about social media. And we use their REX acronym for our program. And that's really thinking with your teens about what is the role of social media? So what is the purpose? How are you using it? Why are you using it? And then to be really mindful about the emotional state that it puts them in. I'm guilty of this too, that I'm scrolling through Instagram and I have no idea how I felt through that, but I definitely spent an hour of my life doing it. And so really working with the teens about being mindful. How did you feel before you used it? How did you feel during? And was that shift helpful? Was it effective? Did it feel good? And on sort of the opposite side of that, what are the negative experiences and challenges that they have? Are they having trouble stopping their use? Are they experiencing cyberbullying? Those sorts of things. And having conversations, yes, about the good, but also about the challenges. Really working on knowing the knowledge, so how to monitor your usage, how to be intentional about that. And then finally, how do we make sure that we're using social media in a way that is supportive and being, again, back to being mindful, knowing what situations feel good and how to maximize those experiences, But also to your question, how do we notice when maybe it is having a negative impact our life, and how do we work on minimizing those experiences? So I think just really getting in on those key points as a family and normalizing the conversation around that.
Wow, thank you so much. Your expertise for this work really shines through here, and we're just so grateful. Stephanie, expanding on what Kristin shared, once families recognize that social media may be having a negative impact, what are some practical steps they can take to support their child and create healthier digital habits at home?
Yeah, I love this question because we coming from a very large district, I'm not familiar with many teenagers who welcome conversations about their usage and warmly invite limitations being placed on them. I think we all know the reality is there are honestly some very addictive properties about being on social media and phone usage. And so what I have noticed, whether it's a disciplinary action or working with a family, I can't actually recall one instance where a family put a boundary in place or something in place and the kid said, "Thank you so much. Like, I was really hoping this was the conversation we were going to have today." And so I think it's a lot more about think about other things in the way you would approach it, right? So maybe healthy eating or habits of like we work before we play, right? Like we get our homework done before we go out. Think of anything else. We probably wouldn't just put the hammer down all of a sudden, but we're trying, right? The whole goal in parenting is that we can help influence that inner voice. And so sometimes it can be things like, hey, like depending on what your hygiene is, I noticed that you were on social media for 2 hours yesterday, and you also seemed really upset last night at dinner, right? Because if you go directly there, they can't go there with you. But if you help them try to build connections, right? And I think if that can be a conversation, then great, because you're kind of teaching them that impact and then helping them regulate that piece. I think the honest truth is sometimes, and I've had a lot of parents tell me this before. I did a presentation one time on this, and I actually had a grandmother come up to me and she said, "This is all well and good, but my granddaughter's not going to respond well when this happens. Where do I go?" And so I think the best advice I can give parents, if it's not already a part of the conversation, because that takes time to really build to be normal. If that's not the case, then I would say it takes a lot of intentionality on your part to create something that the family goes out to do or goes out to eat or makes a meal together, whatever that is. And rather than saying, "And I don't want any phones," you just say, "Hey, we're going to do this thing together. And you know what? Even me, I don't even want to be distracted. We're going to put our phones over here because I just really want to spend some good time with you." Because then a follow-up conversation is, it was so nice just to be together and be unplugged, because then you're modeling, right? And you're making it natural. It's not you monitoring your phone use. It's all of us. I do it as well. And so I think when we can maybe replace some behaviors, when we can do that directly, that's wonderful as a parent. But sometimes we have to indirectly replace behaviors and introduce other activities that are tech-free and then work to build those connections with them. Like, wasn't it, we were all getting along and we didn't even have a phone on us. You know what I mean? So again, it's the direct, indirect piece. And so if it's not there to directly have a conversation about, I think it's building opportunities for them to be unplugged and really reflect, like Dr. Wolfe was talking about, how well they felt also not being on a device. I think it surprises them sometimes too, because it's never been normal, right? It has been normal to have the phone. So I would say that's the best thing, especially for the spectrum of where you are in that development with your child.
All right. Well, thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate your thoughtful response. Jennifer, we have heard from both Kristin and Stephanie about the emotional and behavioral challenges kids face with social media and how families can begin to respond. From your perspective as a parent leader and advocate, what role can PTA and school leaders play in helping families stay engaged and empowered in the digital age?
Well, thank you, Melinda. I certainly know how overwhelming it can feel to keep up with the digital world our kids are growing up in, but I want everybody to remember that we are not powerless. We are partners in this. And PTA really does have a unique role in bridging that gap between families and school and policy. We can educate parents, elevate student voices, and advocate for safeguards that truly protect kids while still allowing them to grow and connect online. So whether it's just hosting conversations like this, or providing resources on digital wellness, or speaking at the Capitol about thoughtful legislation, we as PTA are here to ensure parents are part of the conversation and just not left reacting to it. School leaders obviously play a key role in this partnership. And then when schools and families are working together, not just on rules, really on the shared values around this digital behavior, we create communities where kids feel supported and not punished. So to me, the PTA's role isn't just about advocacy, it's about connection. We really want to empower parents with information and the confidence to show up, to ask the questions, and to truly be part of the solution.
Yeah, that focus on supporting families is so important. Thank you, Jennifer. Kristin, if I can come back to you. We've talked about the emotional impact of social media and how families can recognize when it becomes harmful. Let's shift to the proactive side. What are some effective strategies parents can use to set healthy boundaries around screen time and digital engagement, especially as kids get older and more independent?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is one of the most direct questions I get from caregivers is like, we want to have healthy social media use in our family, but how do we do that? And I think there's a variety of answers. And I think the first thing I recommend that families do is really think about what the family values around social media are, around technology use in the home, and sort of come together as a family having those conversations about what we want media use to look like in our home. And then I think from there, there are certain interventions that parents can do to help protect their kids. There are, certain features on different platforms specifically for teens. There are ways that we can stop the alerts. I know just even sitting here, my phone has gone off, 15 different times for different alerts. Like there are ways to silence those things. And so it's not that we're taking away social media, but maybe we are limiting the number of alerts that are popping through and distracting their kids. I think one of your questions was about how they get older and more independent. I think some forethought through that about, okay, this is, my child is 13 and this is sort of how we're thinking about social media now. And then what do we want that to look like as they grow up? What are the values and lessons that we want to teach them about social media use? When they go off to college, what are we hoping they already know so that they can effectively use it? And I think, again, normalizing those conversations, having those conversations. There are also ways, if we're having these conversations with our kids, if they say, hey, I actually saw this really disturbing thing, work with your kids about how we can minimize that sort of content coming through. How do we block people? Those sorts of things. It can be really useful. I think another piece, we've mentioned sleep several times throughout this. How do we limit use in a way that doesn't, like, how do we help with sleep? And is that the phone is in a basket outside the room? Is it that, I work with a lot of families that have family charging stations now in the kitchen or somewhere else. And that's where everybody, including the parents, puts their phone at the end of the night. But again, I think it all boils back to trainings and conversations, because this isn't innate. Teens don't, like, frontal lobes aren't developed, right? They don't inherently know how to use social media in a helpful way. And so it's our job as counselors, as therapists, as caregivers, to really work with them to be able to implement these skills in a meaningful way that they can then take on to adulthood.
Yeah, truly preparing them for the future and having great habits. So thank you. Stephanie, continuing that thread, once families start setting boundaries, how can we equip parents and guardians to have ongoing, open conversations with their kids about what they're seeing and experiencing online, especially as platforms and trends keep evolving?
Yeah, I really do want to speak to the spectrum of possibilities of someone that might hear this, where they might have a 17-year-old, or they might have a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, and they're kind of early on, And so I think what's really important, exactly what Dr. Wolfe said, like what is what's an ideal situation for you and your family and your values? Where are you at now? And some people are building from that, and some people are deconstructing from that to kind of put some things back in place, right? And so just to acknowledge anyone that would hear this, where that is. One of the things that we have a saying in crisis response is we never waste a crisis. We never waste a news story. And I have taken that habit right into social media as well. Like, let's not waste a news story. Every time you hear about something, like, you talk about it with your kids, you know, and that can be on the spectrum of possibilities, like somebody being upset that they're not invited to a party, someone that experiences human trafficking, right? I mean, just the spectrum of it, to teach them. And I've tried to adopt for myself very much this idea of like a driver's permit. Like, we're going to have a lot of conversations and exaggerate a lot of things. Like, here's where the rule says to stop at the stop sign. Here's where you actually stop the stop sign the second time to make sure nobody's coming, right? Like, the book rules and then the real life rules. And so we try to talk through all of those things. And I think such a great opportunity with your kid, because whether you think that they would or wouldn't get into some of those scenarios, you are helping them understand that other world, maybe beyond even what they've experienced, right? And so I think that's good. Graduating into platforms, I personally think is very important. I think when it's wide open, you know, that can be harder when they graduate into it, maybe the amount of time they can spend on it. I think teaching kids about algorithms, right, on their social media, I think is very important, that you could teach them about that and say, hey, this is this really great custom feed, but let me show you how to make it what you want it to be, right? I can think of a recent concert my son and I went to, and how many people were on Snapchat the whole time. And I remember leaning over to him and saying, oh my goodness, I said, they're not like getting to be in this moment right now because it's having to be a part of their like snaps. And he's like, no way, man, right? And so that's not like to cast judgment, but like, it's just a natural part of the conversation. And so I think deciding your values, deciding where you're at, are you building from, are you deconstructing, making it a part of those natural conversations, and graduating into responsibility the way we do everything else, right? Like, we build independence in the things our kids get to do. We don't just buy the car and the keys and say go, right? We graduate into that. And so, and I think what's really helpful for that is, as new things, you know, you talk about these platforms evolving, then they can recognize those too, right? And you can say, did you notice that? Did you see that? What is that? What are you doing with this? You know what I mean? And so I think that's important. And just continuing to have conversations like this, you know, there's platforms that exist right now that didn't exist when I first started talking about it. So just continuing the conversation.
Yeah, that really highlights how vital it is for families to keep the lines of communication open and stay connected and engaged. Jennifer, how can PTA and school communities help create a culture of ongoing engagement and foster open communication at home and in schools? And as we look at the broader picture, how is Texas PTA using its voice to create lasting changes for families across the state?
Well, I believe that ongoing engagement starts with strong and trusting relationships between families, schools, and each other. And then when PTA creates the space where parents feel heard and supported and connected, then what happens is that families will stay involved and have honest conversations at home, and especially about digital life. So to support these conversations, Texas PTA offers these Connect programs, which are focused not only on this, but even a lot of mental health topics. National PTA provides programs such as PTA Connected, the Smart Talk, Be Internet Awesome, and some of these can be accompanied by grants. So these tools really help families navigate digital safety and build stronger parent-child connections, encouraging open dialogue at home and in the school. So at the state level, Texas PTA has been active at the Capitol. We supported limiting cell phone use during instructional time while preserving local control. House Bill 1481 passed, requiring districts to adopt phone-free policies during the school day. We also champion mental health access Senate Bill 207 passed, allowing excused absences for mental health, and Senate Bill 646 supports the school counselor pipeline. Though additional funding for school-based mental health did not pass this session, we remain committed to advocating for it. We have tracked social media legislation as well. Senate Bill 2420 became law, setting age verification and parental consent requirements within the app stores. Broader social media bills did not advance, but obviously this discussion continues. At the federal level, Texas PTA is working with National PTA to support the Kids Online Safety and Privacy Act, which this bill expands protections for teens under 16, requires default high privacy settings, bans targeted ads, limits data collection without consent, and gives parents the ability to erase their child's data. It also strengthens reporting tools for harmful content. All of this highlights why PTA's voice at the local, state, and national levels is essential for keeping families informed, connected, and empowered in today's digital world.
Well, it's inspiring to hear how PTA is helping families stay informed and engaged, both at home and at the Capitol. That brings us to the major shift coming to Texas classrooms. With the passage of House Bill 1481, schools will now be required to implement policies that prohibit student use of personal devices during the entire school day, with some exceptions for medical and learning needs. Stephanie, from your district perspective, how are schools preparing to implement this new law, and what role can families play in supporting a smooth transition?
Yeah, I first did want to say I can't express enough gratitude for what Texas PTA has done to support whole child development across the state. This is a huge bit of that conversation. The research shows it takes about 15 minutes after checking your phone to truly get back on track. So if you get 2 or 3 notifications in a class, that whole class period is a wash, right? And so I'm so grateful for it. There's a lot of opportunity with House Bill 1481. I've already started to see a lot of parents and people dialoguing about it online. I think every teacher and administrator would tell you this will absolutely result in more learning happening at school, which is great because that's why we send them there. But like every law, it can be very open to interpretation. And so I can say statewide, people are still making a lot of plans on what that will look like. Also, to speak to what Jennifer had mentioned, there's the local control piece. And so I think a lot of districts, I can speak for mine, are looking to try to find ways to follow that law in a way that absolutely works for their community. There's already some ideas in place. We've already had some schools kind of piloting this anyways, because we know it's tied to instruction and performance. And so there will absolutely be some things in place, I anticipate, where kids will be able to bring their phones to school, but they will understand how they won't use them in instructional times. So I very much anticipate something like that. You know, I think the absolute biggest thing that families can do to support this is, number one, to understand that it is the law and not the school. And so the more that they can partner and ask, how can I help? Whether that's influencing the how, right? Or whether it's helping their kid understand, yes, I know you heard no, not at all, zero tolerance, you're never going to touch a phone again for the rest of your life, but let me help you understand what that actually means, right? But just to partner and to understand your role is partnership with the campus, your role is partnership with the district, and to understand that, you know, we all, it's very easy in human nature to hear something and have an initial reaction of understanding what we don't know and understand. And the best thing we can do for our students at this time is to help them the same way we do in life. Hey, you've heard this thing that almost sounds maybe like it's undesirable, but what does it actually mean? What does this actually mean? And how can we lean into this a bit? And you can develop your own habits, right? Let's ask questions before we assume, right? I don't think a lot of districts are going to have them ban at lunch, for example, right? So we'll see what that looks like. But I think the biggest thing is the same thing, this whole conversation, come alongside them and have conversations about what they can and can't control and how they're going to make good decisions in the midst of that. I do think it's going to make for a better learning environment in the classroom for sure. So, but I think locally each district doing that. And I would say if your district hasn't decided that already, if you want to be a partner in the how, not the if, that would be wonderful.
Right. Well, it's clear that schools are taking important steps to create healthier learning environments, and that kind of structure can be really powerful when mirrored at home. Kristin, building on that, how can families create a simple, effective social media or digital use plan that supports their child's well-being? And what are some key elements that make those plans actually work in real life?
Yes, I love this question, and I love a family media plan. This was definitely not a thing that we did when I was growing up. Like, we didn't talk about it. It was just sort of a thing that existed. And I love the idea of families coming together and talking about, again, what are our family values around this? In our clinic, we actually have our kids fill out a values card sort where they're really thinking about what are my top priorities in life and how does social media map onto that. And I think that's such a great family conversation to have as well. I think also as part of that media plan, thinking about how do I want to interact with other people, right? We have social norms for how we interact with people in the real world, face to face, day to day. But I think there's been less social norms around how are we supposed to act online. And I think especially for our teens, really talking through, okay, in life, in the real world, you're really interested in being kind and empathetic and those sorts of things. How do we transfer that into your interactions with other people? I think as part of that plan as well, talking about screen-free times and zones, whether that's during dinner, at night, and that's really up to the family what makes sense for them. But I think that's an important conversation. And then you had also asked about the key elements to make the plan work, because I've seen these be incredibly successful, and I've also seen them not work out so well. And I think the times where the families have been really challenged is when this is a brand new concept and parents come in and say, this is what we're doing. And it's not really a conversation. And I think where I've seen to be really effective is where parents take a very non-judgmental attitude to this. They take a spirit of curiosity to it. And they're asking the questions about what do you want out of this? What do we want out of this? And then, as Dr. Cook alluded to earlier, the parents or the caregivers are modeling the same behavior, because I think where teens sometimes get really frustrated is they get told, well, you can't use your phone after dinner. And then dad is sending emails for work after dinner. And there's a sense of maybe unfairness to it. And so I think coming with a family plan in which it is agreed that the entire family will follow the plan, I've seen that be really successful with some of my patients.
All right, great. Having a plan in place can really help families be more stable and confident. So thank you, Kristin, for expanding on how planning can help the process. Stephanie, let's talk about the early stages. When a child is first getting a phone or starting to ask about social media, how can parents approach that moment with intention? What does healthy digital hygiene look like at that stage and beyond? And how can boundaries be introduced gradually? You alluded to this a little bit. And just as important, how can parents model the kind of digital behavior they hope to see in their kids?
Yeah. I think one of, after you decide which platform that they're, if you're going to say yes, we're just going to assume the yeses in this conversation, what platform they're going to be on. I think something that's really important, and it's been really helpful, I can say in my family, is how much time you're going to spend on that device, because you do have the ability on the phone as the parent through parental controls, and that's not an extra, vendor or anything like that. You have controls on the phone where you can decide how much time they're going to have on that device, on that app. And so I think deciding what time, how much you're going to get, and then also, are they going to get that time privately, or are they going to get that time with you? Right. One of the things I've done with my personal kids is I've said, like with my son, find me someone you look up to and that you respect, and let's look at how their profiles are set up. right? Let's look at how they use it. Let's look at what they're putting out there. And that doesn't mean you have to use it like that, but let's go to somebody you respect, because you want to be somebody respectable online as well. So once you've established the platform, how much time, and then I would say doing it alongside you. Again, it's kind of like a driver's permit. It really is okay for them to sit right next to you and do that. So if you're still on the front end of that, I think that that's really helpful. And I think it's really helpful, Dr. Wolfe alluded to this, to be able to say, do you know who that is? Like, would you want them to have access to your stuff, right? Or do you want to block them? How do you block them? How do you set up your own parameters, right? So I think when they're doing that alongside you, you're getting to like show them that as you go. And so I think that's really important to do that. And since you're modeling, there's a time and place for it. It kind of fixes the other stuff, because there's not a chance they're going to be doing it at dinner or in the car in the back seat without your supervision, because they need your approval for the time anyways. So I think that's one of the initial things that is really helpful, because I think it really establishes for them some rhythms of sometimes I'm on it and sometimes I'm not, and I don't have to be on it everywhere right now, right? And so I think that's really important. And I think that's a wonderful way to introduce them to it. And I think it also helps them make a connection on it being a tool and not the place they live their life, if that makes sense. And so I think then like gradually building up to that, right? Like there's going to come a time where, you know, they have more time at that, and then they're not supervised with that. And one of the things I like to tell my kids a lot, which is really just positive behavioral conditioning, but the more you handle this responsibly, the more you give me an opportunity to say yes, right? And so when we can graduate into our yeses, that seems to always be easier than the opposite. But wherever you are in that development right now, right? Like you're either building on or deconstructing into it, you know, just kind of respecting that journey for sure.
Yeah, that's such a helpful plan on how families can start strong with digital habits. So thank you so much for that perspective. Kristin, before we move on, do you have any additional thoughts on how parents can support their kids during these early stages, especially when it comes to modeling healthy behavior or navigating those first social media experiences?
Yeah, I think modeling healthy behavior goes such a long way. I had a very dear friend of mine who was complaining to me about their child's social media use. And during that conversation, again, they had picked up their phone multiple times to check emails, to check texts, that sort of thing. And we laugh about it now, but we did sort of have to have that conversation of, if this is how the adults in the house are using technology and social media, then it makes sense that this is how the teens are automatically going to assume that it should be used. And so I think that sort of modeling can be really important. I think also having dedicated time, especially for some of our younger teens who may be on social media, to allow them to show you what they're excited about for social media. So sitting down and sort of being like, okay, show me like, your five favorite reels that you saw today, or show me, your favorite TikTok dance. So you're really engaging in that conversation, again, from a place of curiosity, but it allows a safe conversation around social media, but it also allows the caregivers to really understand what's happening. And then I think also just, talking with your kids about, social media is great, but what other activities are you interested in? You're watching these cool videos of dance. Like, would you be interested in taking a dance class and maybe doing some more sort of offline activities based on what they have found online?
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Kristin, I think this one may be best for you to take. Lori Duke said, as a parent, I have a very love-hate relationship with technology, specifically video games. It's a great motivator and reduces conflict around house rules and expectations, especially for children with ADHD. But I worry about the hyper-focus on their video games, even when they're not playing, like in their conversations. So how can I better redirect them to talk more about their real world life? Kristin?
That's such a great question. And I think we all have a love-hate relationship with technology and video games. I mean, I think I first just want to start with validation of, this is a really common thing that comes up, is that kids get really excited about whether it be social media or video games or whatever the latest technology is. And they do really want to share about that. So I think in some ways, the fact that our kids do want to tell us all about their technology and video games is a good thing. So, I do want to point that out. And at the same time, I hear your concern of there is more to life than just this video game. And so how do I help my child expand that? And I think part of that is just having sort of a bag of questions that you might ask. And not like, tell me everything about school and I want to know exactly what happened today, but just sort of like open-ended questions that you can ask about their life, and it can be like silly icebreakers, right? If you were an animal, what animal would you be and why? All the way to like more sort of, you said that maybe you wanted to be a doctor when you grew up, and I didn't know that. Tell me more about that. So taking a vested interest in other interests they may have to help promote those can be one way to sort of redirect those conversations. But I think as much of this conversation has alluded to, I think just having more targeted conversations around things can be really helpful to sort of navigate away from the digital world.
Well, it's really great that you're giving us ideas for conversation starters and that type of thing. So thank you there. With the time we have left, Jennifer, what is your message to policymakers when it comes to balancing innovation in tech with the mental and emotional safety of our kids? Jennifer?
My message would be simple, and that's just that innovation and safety are not mutually exclusive. We can absolutely celebrate advances in technology while protecting the well-being of our kids. And I think families really aren't asking for perfection. They're asking for transparency, accountability, and ultimately a voice in the process. And we need thoughtful policies that put meaningful guardrails in place, especially for our younger users, without stifling the creativity. And that includes clear privacy standards, effective parental tools, and protections that ensure content is age appropriate. At the end of the day, children should grow up in a digital world that supports their development, not one that just profits from their vulnerabilities. And families shouldn't have to navigate this alone. Lawmakers have a real opportunity here to lead, not just respond, and PTA stands ready to partner with them to help create safer, more supportive digital futures for our kids.
All right, great. Thank you, Jennifer. We have time for one more question. Stephanie, Kristin, are there any additional resources you'd recommend for parents, whether it's about navigating phone use, setting digital boundaries, or supporting their kids' overall well-being? Stephanie, you want to go first?
I don't mean to sound empty-handed, but I do want to answer this question in such a simple way. I think just a piece of paper and a pen and deciding what your family's values are and how you're going to work together to do that is a wonderful first start. And it's not the only resource, but it's also the most powerful thing you'll do because it's the most natural way to constantly refer back to what values are and living and walking in our values. And that's so transferable to every other thing you do in parenting. And so that makes it feel very natural and not like this other thing.
Yeah. Kristin, would you like to comment there?
I agree. We're talking about maybe being on technology too much. I think the pen and paper is a great way to go. If you want a digital version, the American Academy of Pediatrics does have a family media plan that some of my families have found very helpful. It's basically everything we've talked about, but it's clickable, it's, typable, those sorts of things. And I think it does have some nice prompts and ideas intermixed in it that help some of our families.
All right, man, so much great information. Thank you. Sadly, with that, we are out of time. I'm amazed at the amount of critical and meaningful information we've uncovered today, including understanding the digital landscape. We explored how media and technology are influencing our children's development, relationships, and mental well-being. Recognizing red flags online. We discussed how to identify warning signs of unhealthy media habits, online pressure, and digital risks that may impact kids and teens. We shared strategies to open conversations, to empower our families, to model balanced media use and keep our children in thoughtful, informed decisions. Accessing tools and support, we highlighted practical resources to help families create healthier digital habits and navigate challenges together. This conversation is just the beginning, and by showing up today, you are taking an important step towards helping your family thrive in a connected world. So the digital world isn't slowing down, and neither can we. As parents, caregivers, and advocates, we have a powerful role to play in shaping how our children engage with media. So what can you do today to make a difference? Take time to stay informed. Subscribe to reliable sources focused on digital wellness, youth mental health, and online safety. Staying current helps you lead and parent with confidence. Start the conversation at home. Ask your child what they're watching, who they follow, and how it makes them feel. Keep it judgment-free and open. It's not about control, it's about connection. Share what you've learned. Talk with other parents, educators, and PTA members. When we spread awareness, we multiply our impact. Use the tools available to you. Explore settings, apps, and resources that help you create a healthier media environment at home. Support it out there. Use it. Support is out there. Use it. Excuse me. And champion mindful media in your community. Host a conversation at your school, PTA, or neighborhood group. The more we talk, the more we empower families. This isn't about perfect parenting. It's about present, proactive, and willing to grow alongside our kids in a digital age. Let's work together to build a culture of connection, safety, and digital balance for every family in Texas. Thank you to all of you, our audience, for joining us today for this important conversation. We hope you found this conversation valuable and that you feel more informed and empowered. You'll receive a follow-up email after today's session, which will include a link to additional resources. We hope you find them helpful as you continue these important conversations. I want to give another special shout out to our expert panelists. Thank you, Dr. Kristin Wolfe, Dr. Stephanie Cook, and our president, Jennifer Easley, for spending this time with us and sharing your invaluable knowledge. Finally, I want to thank our amazing Director of Programs and Resources, Carrie Mays, for your behind-the-scenes work to make this program successful. Thank you to Heidi Picoy, Texas PTA's president-elect, for her support of this program. And let's bring back Jennifer for some final words.
Thank you, Melinda. As we close this important conversation on mindful media, I do want to thank you not just for your time, but for bringing your intention and care. The digital world is shifting fast. Families are navigating it in real time. And that's what makes this work so urgent and so meaningful. So a heartfelt thank you to Melinda and Carrie Mays for organizing today's event, and to our panelists for genuinely sharing your experiences and insights. Your voices have really helped us reflect more deeply and more compassionately on the role media plays in our children's lives. What we've heard today is both a reminder and a call to action. Our kids can thrive in the digital age, but it takes awareness, connection, and a shared commitment to engage. So let's commit to continuing the conversation at home, not just about rules, but about values, feelings, and choices online. Sharing what we've learned with our schools, PTAs, communities, and policymakers so more families feel informed and supported, and modeling mindful media habits ourselves, because our kids are always watching how we show up. Thank you for being part of this important dialogue. Together, we can build a culture of balance, trust, and resilience where families are not just connected, but truly thriving in the digital world.